G'day and welcome to another episode of Perth Property Insider. I'm your host, Jared Mann, and today I'm back with another inside story where I'm chatting to Regan about his 3 property purchases so far, the hard work he's done along the way and how it's all paying off for him and his family. He's taken the approach of mixing investing and personal living, and there's lots we can learn. It's going to be a 2-parter. In this first part, we're going to go through his Beckenham and Gosnells purchase, and make sure you stick around for part 2, which is jam-packed with plenty of upside and learnings from his Mount Hawthorn purchase. So I know there's a lot of similarities on this one to Cameron's story on not choosing people to be the same and have done the same things, but these 2 younger guys have taken a lot of action, and but just the first two people that came to mind. So let's go inside.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management specialists servicing the whole of Perth. Now, here is your host, Jared Mann.
G'day, Regan. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. I'm really excited to get inside your story.
G'day, Jared. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So got lots to cover. This might end up being a 2-parter, I think, because you've done a few things in property so far. So lots to unpack today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So give us a bit of background on yourself and what you do for a living to paint the picture for us.
Yep. So I'm a 29-year-old chartered accountant working in 2 dual roles. So basically, I'm a management accountant and company secretary for a local engineering company and also a listed mineral exploration company.
Oh, that must keep it interesting having 2 different roles, and you must know the numbers pretty well when it comes to things.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll tell you what, it makes the month end pretty stressful. There's a lot to do. So, yeah, and I guess adding to that, my wife, who's obviously a big part of the picture, Kimberly, she's a 29-year-old secondary teacher, currently on maternity leave after the birth of our 2nd child.
Got to love teachers and everything they do for our kids, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how old's your youngest one now?
So she was born on the 31st of December, so she's just gone past 2 months.
Yes, so you've got your work cut out for you at the moment. And how's she
running around?
So it was a girl?
Yeah, a girl, yep. Yeah, so she's doing pretty well, but the different schedule when you've got a toddler and a newborn is what makes it very difficult. That's what everyone says, and we're yet to have a second. Might be on the cards, but we'll see what happens, as they say. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully it all goes well.
So has Kimberly been pretty involved with your investing along the way? I know some couples, one person does a lot of it and the other one just goes along for the ride, and sometimes you get different roles depending on your skills. How's that sort of come about for you both?
Yeah, the dynamic actually works quite well. Kimberly is naturally frugal, which is good. So when it comes to spending, there's never any issues there. When it comes to share investing, she tends to just accept what I say. I'm obviously more interested in that than she is, so that's good. But when it comes to property, it's very much 50-50. But the good thing is we are pretty much always on the same page, whether it's coming to purchase a property or renovating the property or the style that we like. Everything is almost the same.
Well, it's good that you can bounce that around together and reach a consensus and have the same goals. And I'm sure as we'll unpack for everyone, you've involved your home with your investing a lot. So it even makes it closer to home with your decisions, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It almost sort of crosses the lines a little bit, though, where you've got that sort of emotional decision and financial decision. So you sort of really need to get that quite clear when you're sort of taking on the strategy that we have so far. Yeah,
good one. And tell us, how did you originally come across the idea of property investing? Because everyone discovers it in a different way.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just been quite a natural interest, to be honest. Always been interested in the TV shows like The Block, Unreal Estate, Grand Designs and that sort of thing.
Yeah, cool.
And, my father, who's still living in New Zealand, where I'm from originally, would buy and sell properties throughout the years. And I think I sort of vicariously learnt that way. He was always telling me how he regrets selling particular properties. And I think that's when I first realised that I want to be purchasing properties and holding them long term.
And has he done pretty well during the recent booms over there?
Yeah, he's done quite well for himself, definitely. He's in Auckland, which is where most of the demand seems to be in those price rises. So
yeah, I've got family on my dad's side in Auckland and hoping to get across there. If the travel bubble existed for a little while, didn't it? And then it burst before anyone really got to go between the two places. So hoping to get back there would be good.
Yeah. Shouldn't be too much longer before we can get there. So
it could be one of the only places where a coffee costs more, because I think on my last holiday it did.
So exactly.
It might be even more now than Perth.
That's right. And even with the way petrol prices have gone here recently, petrol's more expensive over there. So
okay. And how did that sort of evolve from your dad, seeing what your dad was doing? And
yeah, we obviously speak on the phone quite regularly. So, as things happen, whether he sold a property or just having a general conversation, and he brings up a property that he purchased back in the day, he would always tell me the good things about it and also what he would wish he had done differently. So I remember one example he gave me of a property that he thought he could sell it himself without using an agent. Obviously, he did sell the property, but in hindsight, could have made significantly more had he had someone who was completely aware of the market and sort of understood how to market that property and maximize the return.
And just for the record, I haven't, told you to share that story, have I?
Yeah, exactly.
Tee you up beforehand. Oh, yeah, must use sales agents.
Yeah.
So you've had a bit of exposure to seeing behind the scenes of how people have gone in property from your accounting side as well.
Yeah, exactly right. So before my current role, I was working in business advisory, so tax returns and that sort of thing. And, a lot of those sort of high net worth individuals have property. So you see all sorts of different properties and different types of investment strategies, whether that's just renting out long term or if it's Airbnb or they're developing or subdividing.
Yeah,
so, you sort of get to see other people's numbers, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Just looking at the balance sheets and cash flow statements and seeing, you can pretty much pull apart how someone's whole, investing's done from the accounting side, couldn't you?
Yeah, exactly right. And particularly with a lot of the older clients who have, significant wealth, you can almost break it down and see where that wealth has come from over time. And that, to an extent, sort of paints a picture for you that you can sort of replicate.
Yeah, good.
Very fortunate in that sense.
It's always good when you meet an older investor and, they've had time, they've let time do the heavy lifting for them, but also made some good choices and held on, where many people sell and might not see the benefits. So So where else have you kind of learned about investing then?
So I guess similar to a lot of people, really, there's the podcast. So I listen to your podcast obviously quite a bit. The Property Couch was the other one. That was the first
Bryce.
property related
before. It's good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the first property related podcast that I started listening to, and I just was obsessed with it. So the drive to work and drive home, I was constantly listening.
You can get through a lot, can't you? When some of my mates are always like, how do you continuously learn all the time? And you're just always talking about new books, new ideas. And I'm like, man, I do. I just, every time I'm driving, every time I'm at the gym, when I walk to drop my daughter at daycare, doing chores around the house makes it bearable. Yeah.
And it's certainly better than listening to commercial radio.
Yeah. So what else have you found has helped in learning?
Yeah, so other than podcasts, the other big one was networking. So learning from family and friends who have either done it themselves before or work in the industry. And I've never been shy to just ask the question. So, as I build up my network, if I'm unsure of something, then I'm more than willing to ask someone that I think would know the answer. I've also learned a lot just by doing. So I think where I am now versus where I was when we purchased our first property, that's come a long way just from doing and experiencing it.
And that's a good one too to touch on, because so many people, I meet them, they've got lots of grand plans. I meet them again in 4 or 5 years. Oh, what have you got? What have you done since? And they've had the capacity to do it. They've known enough to take action, and then you bump into them and they still haven't done anything. And they could have had, lots of learnings in between, and they might not have got it all right, but It's like my first few purchases as well. I'm sure you've learned a lot from yours. So
yeah, exactly. There's always something to be learned from every purchase, I suppose. So
even the bad ones.
Yeah, especially
on my side.
Yeah. But other than that, there's I've researched strategies online or even gotten good information from social media. So different communities on Facebook or even TikTok. There's people who post different content on there and lots of things to learn. Then, of course, the traditional method of reading books, which is not necessarily my forte, but I've read the occasional finance book.
It's good when you can get the time. Harder with kids, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Might get a few pages done before you have to put it down. So tell us about your first purchase in Beckenham, it was.
Yes, so we purchased our first property in Beckenham in March of 2015. That was $407,500, so pretty well near the peak of the market.
An interesting offer price there too, making it more of a random one.
Yeah, well, it's actually funny how it happened. Our original offer was $405, but when we were inspecting the property, the owner was actually there at the time, and obviously so was the real estate agent. So I just pulled the agent aside and said, "Hey, we want to offer $405." She was like, "Oh, I'll go ask him." Walks outside, asks him. He comes back and says, "Oh, he really wants $410." And I said, "Oh, $5,000, but I'll meet you in the middle."
Okay.
And then they said yes, and then we drove to the office and signed up the paperwork after that on that basis. So that's how it ended up at that number.
You'll split the difference.
Yeah, exactly. It worked out all right.
So that would have been towards the upper part of the market there in 2015, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So
I guess when we think back, how did you feel? Did you know it was the top of the market? Because even when I'm doing this every week, I didn't necessarily know it was the top, and we were all kind of hoping we'd get an extra run on, and things hadn't gone crazy to that point. But
so I think in terms of understanding the market as a whole, I was probably a little bit naive to it, but I had taken the view that we're going to be owning this property long term, so I'm not too fussed. There's near the peak of the market, and that might be just a simplified way of putting it, but I guess
it was going to be a home as well. So
exactly,
as you say, a bit of a mixed decision. It's not like you're going to be, I think I won't buy a home and not have that security that's involved with it as well. Yeah,
that's right. So and we were sort of walking through the property and seeing the ways we could add value as well. So we try to factor that in as well. It was a 3x1 when we purchased the property. It's on 500 square meters. I think one of the biggest value adds that we did was turning it into a 3x2, just using the existing under roof space that was already there. We turned the existing bathroom into a bathroom laundry combo, sort of what you see in apartments, and then converted the laundry into an ensuite bathroom. Okay. So, we could sort of see those possibilities when we were looking through the property, and that excited us.
And I was surprised to see that the price wasn't worth more at the moment. Likely sort of 440, 460, and maybe able to get more. That's kind of the logical price. But I guess after everything you've spent, probably not the greatest return to date, but also learned a lot of lessons from it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's probably worth roughly what we paid for it plus all the renovation costs over the years. Yeah. But again, we learned a lot doing the renovations. We enjoyed the property, and those renovations have allowed us to get a good tenant in there.
Yeah, extra rental return, I guess, as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
I guess some of the other properties in that area might still not be back to where they were. So you've got to consider the value added to keep it closer to even.
Yeah, exactly right.
And so you moved out to Gosnells, wasn't it, in August 2020?
Yes, that's right. So we had purchased a property in Gosnells in July 2019, I think it was, maybe June 2019. We purchased or acquired that property, I guess, with the intent of tidying it up because we could see it was really quite run down. So it was an opportunistic acquisition, really. We didn't necessarily consider typical fundamentals. We just saw a property and said, that hasn't been looked after. I think we can tidy it up. So, for example, the yard at the front and the back had not been maintained in it must have been years. It literally looked
Bit
like
of a jungle, was it?
Yeah, there was literally a family of stray cats living in the backyard.
Oh boy.
So yeah, before we moved in, we had tenants living there as well. So when we were able to get them out, there was a small window there where I was able to catch all of those cats and have them safely rehomed before my 45-kilo dog arrived and
started
got rid of
making
them
it his
himself.
own.
Yeah.
And I should have asked, was there any sort of key learnings on the Beckenham one first before we move on to Gosnells? Was there anything that, in reflection, you took away from the decisions and where you've come to since?
Yeah, definitely. I think there was probably a number of key learnings, not all of them financial. So the big one was similar to before, just doing. So doing all of these renovations myself, I learned a lot about just general hands-on skills, but also where you can add value through renovations. So
you work out what you don't want to do as well, and what's not worth doing.
Yeah, exactly right. Or what's worth just paying someone to do rather than attempting to do it yourself. So I did a lot of the smaller things, whether it was installing the splashback or the range hood. Did some of the bigger things as well, but understood where it was worth paying someone. So tiling the entire floor, I could have done it, but with the intricate cuts that are sometimes required and the fact that you want it to be very level, I thought for such a large area, I'd rather just pay someone and have it done professionally.
That's good.
Yeah. The other learnings, I suppose, were understanding your timeframes. So as I said, or as you said, we purchased near the top of the market. That would probably spook a lot of people as those prices start to decline. But for us, we sort of just wrote it out. It was okay. We knew we were going to hold the property long term. We were living in there, so it wasn't the end of the world. And I think that kind of emphasised that if you know what your timeframes are, then you shouldn't be too concerned.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm sure if we touch base with you again in 12 or 24 months, Beckenham will have had its kick over the next 6 to 12 months, hopefully. And
I've got my fingers crossed for that. Yeah. I guess the other learning...
I guess you learned a lot about the purchase process. And
yes, sorry, that's what I was looking for. So, we learn a lot about that purchase process, understanding mortgages and just general home ownership as well, which I think probably comes from it being your first home. So I think very similar learnings to what a lot of people would get in that situation.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that it was a mix of sort of financial and emotional drivers. So I guess it's harder to wear the two hats, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, certainly. So I think that was one of the things purchasing this property. We were happy that it was this property and not one of the others that we had previously put offers on. We sort of felt fortuitous in the sense that it was the right property for us after the offer was accepted. But you do look back in hindsight and say, should I have waited, or should I have offered less, or should I have done something differently? But again, with us understanding our timeframes in that situation, it was okay to sort of not stress about it.
Yeah. And you've probably picked up a lot more about the fundamentals that drive growth since,
yes,
you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly right. So there are some good fundamentals with this property in Beckenham. So it's very close to Mills Park, which anyone who's been there would know how great it is there. It's obviously very close to Carousel and the Beckenham train station, but there are other fundamentals there that aren't quite as appealing. So one thing I learned while we owned the property was that little pocket of Beckenham being closer to Roe Highway and having that sort of road noise, although it does become background noise, has sort of hamstringed that little pocket to an extent. So
it was probably perception more than reality.
Exactly.
With the road noise.
Yeah, exactly right. It becomes background noise and you don't even notice it when you're living there. But if someone was to stand out in the street while it's quiet, they're going to hear Roe Highway.
Yeah. And what are the school zones there like? You may not have looked if depending on the age of your kids.
Yeah, well, when we...
not for the latest one anyway.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely not. But our third acquisition was solely because of the school zones, or at least that's the driver that motivated us to move on. So I obviously let my wife do all the research around the school zones, but we came to the conclusion that they're probably not the kind of schools that we want our children going to. There was one child at the time, but particularly when we were in a position to be able to get into a better school zone, So, those schools that Theodore, our oldest, would have gone to, they would be fine. But we had the ability to get him into a better school by acquiring more property. So we chose to do that.
And I guess that's the driving desire from lots of other people all trying to do the same, that, gives these areas their higher than average annual growth rate over time. And I did do a last episode purely on school zones, which sort of showed that there's at least a 2% difference on a good school suburb versus a neighbouring suburb that isn't in that catchment. So
yeah, right. Well, no, that's certainly interesting.
And it adds up over 30 years, like just compounding something at 500,000 over 30 years adds an extra $1.1 million. So if you're buying at a higher price point too, at $1 million, like imagine what that, I haven't actually compounded out $1 million plus, but it'll be a lot.
Yeah, substantial, absolutely. And the school zones, it's all about that owner-occupier appeal.
Exactly.
All part of it.
So tell us about the Gosnells purchase. That was where you moved from Beckenham into Gosnells, and you were saying that it was a bit of an opportunistic one because it needed lots of work. What was the property sort of type there and size and stuff? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so it's a 4x2 with 2 big living rooms on 819 square metres. It's zoned R20/30, so we knew it had the ability to be subdivided, and bonus to that, retain the existing dwelling. Yep. So that was quite exciting. The other thing that made it opportunistic was that walking through the house, you could see where things needed to be tidied up. So, for example, the second living room, which is out at the back of the house, I knew the structure was done professionally. It was all steel framed, etc. But the inside had clearly been done as a home job, probably to save money. So I literally just had to rip down the walls, rip down the ceiling, re-gyprock it, put new weatherboard on the outside, paint it, new lights, and it was as good as new. But it was pretty ugly looking before that, to be honest.
And what did you buy the place for? What sort of price?
Yep, so 315,000. So I think that price probably reflected the state of the property at the time, or at least I hope it did.
And the market was a bit down in 2019 still in June, odd when you bought it. So good timing. Yeah. We could all go back and load up right before the takeoff. Yeah. Hindsight's always beautiful.
Yeah, that's right. It's 2020. So, I think you've noted here that the likely price is 400 to 430, which is fantastic. Obviously, we've done a fair bit of work so far, but the intention of moving into that property was to give me more time to be able to do some of that work myself. Obviously, having a family, it's not turned out the way I expected. It's taken me longer than I thought, but I'll get there in the long run.
Yeah, well, working on the family takes a lot of effort too.
Absolutely.
And take us through some of the other aspects of this one. What were your learnings and what might you do differently next time for Gosnells?
Yeah, so one thing we picked up after moving into the house is that you should always have a pre-purchase plumbing inspection done. So I found there was a pretty nasty blockage in the shower. The previous owner had dumped all sorts of stuff down there, Band-Aids, cotton buds. There were nails down there. Don't know how they got in there, but there were nails. So I managed to clear it myself, but it made me see the value in the...
Stick with us, listeners.
Yeah, exactly.
Things are getting better towards the end or in part 2.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it was not a fun time, that's for sure.
That could have been one you outsourced, I think.
I probably should have in hindsight, but, I stuck with it, got it done. And now the water flows freely, so that's the main thing. So yeah, there's that. I think there's value in pre-purchase plumbing inspections because you'll understand A, blockages, but B, where all the plumbing runs and if there's any sort of general issues there. So plumbing runs under concrete slabs and through the middle of the yard when you're looking to subdivide or anything like that. You can pick those sorts of things up. And as I just mentioned, life gets busy. So I really decided at that point it's okay to pay a professional to assist with the work we're getting done. It's really just a question of the value of my time. So if I can see the value in paying someone to paint the house instead of painting it myself, then I'm okay to do that now. Whereas I think with Beckenham, I took a much more hands-on approach for more things. Whereas with this property, which we're currently still renovating, if I can do it myself but don't have the time, it doesn't bother me too much. I'll pay someone and move on.
At least you kind of know what's involved and if someone's trying to rip you off.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So, that's good. The other thing being an opportunistic acquisition, I think I mentioned just a moment ago, we sort of ignored the fundamentals to an extent. So even though Gosnells really isn't that far from the city, we didn't consider things like proximity to the city or school zones or what amenities are nearby and train stations and stuff like that. So it's an okay area.
You've got the value add potential, and with having added, you can obviously still be subdivided, which you could either leave for someone else or do yourself. And
exactly.
With the improvements you've made and actual cash you've put in, I'm sure if you rented it out, it would be decently cash flow positive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and that's the thing. I think Gosnells probably is gentrifying slowly. So it could be a point in time where, all those fundamentals that I just mentioned aren't too much of a concern.
That's bad.
But I think it does have a bit of a stigma being Gosnells. Where we are, there's no real issues, and it's actually pretty quiet. But people will always have that perception of Gosnells.
Yeah, I say to my staff, I'm going out to look at a property in Gosnells. If I don't come back, or I'm back without my car, that's where I am.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, come look and send a search party.
Thankfully.
The other learning as well, speaking of subdivision, is we immediately began down the path of trying to subdivide this property after we acquired it, which is fine. We got the approvals and, did a few of the surveys and whatnot, but we subsequently decided that it didn't make sense at that point in time financially. So we still have the approval, which expires in August 2022 this year. We're not proceeding with that. So we've literally just burnt $12,000.
Yeah. You can probably get an extension on it for not much money, which will be probably worth doing.
Yeah. Okay.
But a lot of outlay when you're not directly getting a return.
Yeah, exactly. My initial thought was, purchase it, tidy it up, subdivide it, sell off the vacant lot, rent out the front dwelling and move on. My wife was saying we should slow down and not do it. And turns out she was right. We should have slowed down and not done it. But I'll have to look into getting that extension. Actually, I didn't know that was possible. So
definitely worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming along, Regan, to share your story with us so far. We're going to have to break this up into a two-parter. And next time, I'm really excited to be getting stuck into your Mount Hawthorn project. Plenty of upside profits in that one and learning so far. So that's going to be exciting. And we're going to step into the subdivision, the building of the home, and we're going to reflect back on some of your key takeaways and learnings on your investing journey so far, what you see for the Perth market ahead, and your future plans. So lots to cover next time. I'll catch you on the second part.